call to order the meeting of Mayor and Council. Thank everybody for being here, and those who are joining us on home, if you'll rise for the invocation by Councilman Henderson.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all of your provisions. We thank you for this special place we live in. We ask your protections, and we ask your grace and your dispensation of knowledge and wisdom as we deliberate about the affairs of our city. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as a reminder to council, we have an executive session tonight right after our regular meeting. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
No, sir, there are not.
Okay, you've all received our minutes from our last meeting on August 28th. If there are no questions or comments, I'll accept the motion to receive the minutes.
Councilman Henderson, so moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right. First up, we're going to have Mr. Bailey introduce our new employee.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Introduce Matt Chenoweth. He's the newest code inspector. Spent the last 5 years working construction down around Ocean City area, Frankfurt area, with his father. So he has some experience. He's been here for a few weeks and is doing great.
You got to walk the line, Matt, so come on up here.
Welcome, Matt.
No, you keep this up.
Congratulations.
Penny may tackle you if you start to shake hands.
Thanks for being here. Matt, you don't have to stay if you need to get home to your family. We understand. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely, buddy. You're
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Welcome aboard. So the first day I met Matt, when he came to work here, I wondered who brought their son to work that day, and you realize you're getting a little older, so just a little older. So, all right, do we have any correspondence?
No, sir, we do not.
All right, first up under new business, we're inviting our hospital up to speak, Penny Short, along with Steve Leonard, who's president and CEO of PRHS, to give us a little update on what's going on in our local hospital along with Salisbury.
Great. Good evening, folks. My name is Steve Leonard, President and CEO of what is now Tidal Health. And I think everyone here knows Penny Short, President of Tidal Health Nanticoke. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I would have loved to have been here earlier. Maybe if the global pandemic hadn't come about, we would have been there. But suffice to say, we're here now. So I appreciate the opportunity to present a little bit of an overview about Tidal Health and give a little bit of background. And I'll start it off and then turn it over to Penny. Tidal Health, at this point in time, we have about 50 locations with the merger of Nanticoke and Peninsula. We're covering 7 counties, about 5,000 employees, about $1 billion in assets, 2 hospitals, and 7 joint ventures. The joint ventures, most folks don't always see, but that'll change because we haven't always had them as pronounced as we will in the future as being part of Tidal Health. We own things like nursing homes, home health companies, durable medical equipment companies, imaging companies, things along the continuum of healthcare. In order to be sustainable in a future healthcare environment, you do have to have some size and scale servicing a region. Thus, when Nanticoke went looking for partners, we're neighbors. We've had a long-standing relationship going back many years, served the same community. Really looking at them saying, how would you like to create a system together? And here we are 9 months later with the formation of Tidal Health. A couple things, medical partners, Peninsula Regional and Nanticoke are kind of the 3 legs of the stool along with those other companies. Medical partners, you won't really hear that name out in the community. What you'll see is Tidal Health Cardiology, Tidal Health Primary Care, Tidal Health Pulmonology. Those are all the employed physicians that are members of the system. It's, if you think it's rough being a hospital, try being an independent physician these days. It's very uncommon to have physicians coming out of training be independent practitioners anymore. More and more they work for healthcare systems as a part of this larger team. We actually have about 250 providers that are a part of Tidal Health Medical Partners. It is by far the largest physician enterprise on Delmarva going. The next one is Christiana, and then us, down here. I expect that number to be 280 to 300 in 2 years. It's just the way trends are going. It's over 22 different specialties. In that business alone are about 750 employees. You didn't know, I think most of you are probably familiar with Peninsula Regional. I came here actually in 2002, and my roles changed over the years, but started in 1897. It's a fascinating story. You just don't see it. I think most folks, even down in Wicomico, don't necessarily perhaps have the perspective of the scope of services that we provide. We kept it very intentionally Tidal Health Peninsula Regional because it is different than any other system until you get to really Christiana from a hospital perspective. So we've been doing open hearts for about almost 50 years now. 1974 was our first open heart. Find me another community hospital that's been doing it as long as us, and you just won't. So non-academic in the traditional sense, although in a couple of years we will start to have residents at both of our facilities because we are going down an academic path. So we can't do everything. We have great referral relationships with Christiana up north, Hopkins, and University of Maryland to kind of back us up, but we are the tertiary center for really the 7 counties, and we get referrals. And that's part of the long-standing relationship we have with Nanticoke is that great cardiac cath work here, but if they need open heart surgery, I know we have a great option down there along with some other stuff. So some good history there. I'm going to turn over to Penny now, and we'll go to Nanticoke. Looks like it's just a down arrow for you.
Okay, so just a little bit about the history for Nanticoke, and it really was the civic organizations in this community that really endorsed having a hospital. And so in 1950, they did the groundbreaking. And it really was, when you talk about Nanticoke Memorial Hospital, it really was a living memorial for those that had served our country in the war. And so in November 11th, 1951 was the dedication, and that was Armistice Day, and that's why they chose that day to do the dedication. So a lot of rich history with the connection with the community with Nanticoke, as well as Peninsula. That's been important for both of our organizations. We grew, for many years, the hospital looked just like that, but then we grew pretty quickly as we got into the 80s and then the 90s and then where we are today. 1993, we started with the cath lab here in Seaford, and that's when we really did start a strong partnership with Peninsula because of needing that referral base for those patients that needed higher level of care. We added the Mears campus, which is our pavilion where all our physicians are housed, as well as having outpatient lab and radiology there. So, and then we've added the Allen Cancer Center over the years. So, a lot of growth within Nanticoke, and then, we look forward for that just to continue. So here's the picture. If you haven't ridden down by the hospital, the sign, Tidal Health, went up last week. So, and it's on both sides of the building, which I think is really cool. And I think that as we did the launch, you've seen a new energy and new excitement about what it's going to mean to be a part of something bigger, and the things that can bring to us as an organization, but also to the community. So, and that's really one of the most important things we wanted to mention today is the community benefit. What enhanced services to Seaford and the communities that we serve, that's one of the most important reasons, I think, for the affiliation. We're really excited about what's happening with cancer. We have the Allen Cancer Center, and that is a part of the Richard A. Hansen Research Institute. So the patients and the community that we serve, they have access to research and clinical trials, which certainly is important when you're talking about cancer. Also within that, the Richard A. Hansen Institute, they're a part of national collaborations, and one of those is with Johns Hopkins and their research. And so that certainly brings a whole different level to what goes on in the centers here on the Delmarva. We have just recently transitioned our radiation oncology group to associates in radiation medicine, and they're a nationally renowned organization or company. And so, they've hit the ground running. They're going to be adding additional radiation services to Nanticoke that we haven't been able to do before. And then something I think that's even more important is the connection that all the cancer centers have within the system. And we have installed technology, and so the oncologists, both medical, radiation, surgeons, and any other affiliated physicians can talk on a daily basis to plan the care for the cancer patients that are being served at our center. So that's something we really haven't had that type of connection before, but that daily case planning certainly is important, especially to any of us if our family members were there at the cancer center. So a lot of great work being done there. As far as the heart or cardiology, that's one area, like we said, we've worked with them closely, but we wanted to enhance services at Nanticoke around cardiology. So one of the plans is for electrophysiology studies, which right now those patients have to go to Peninsula to get that work done. Their physicians have applied for Delaware license, and then they'll be able to come to our hospital and do those testing there. So that way, the goal really is if it can be done and the patients don't have to travel, then that makes a difference. Because even though it's a 30-minute ride, for some people that's huge, especially when you have, in some of our areas, transportation problems. One of the other big advantages for the affiliation for us is really the capital investment. With the affiliation, a lot of significant dollars came to the table for us to make sure that we have state-of-the-art equipment and state-of-the-art facilities. So, in the upcoming, we have quite a few capital equipment purchases that are coming. New CAT scan, sort of state-of-the-art CAT scan machine that will be installed this year at Nanticoke, as well as many other types of equipment, but also the facilities. We're fortunate. We're on a, our platform, our facility is an aged facility, but we have tried to stay on top of that, but it takes a lot of funds, as you know, to make sure you're staying on top of that. And bringing the affiliation to us really allows that additional funding to keep that going. Electronic medical record, you all hear about the importance of having access to, your physicians having access to your medical record. Within the system, Peninsula and the doctors that are in that area have Epic, and we have Cerner. So we have already kicked off had a kickoff for a transition to go to one record. So one patient, one record, no matter where you visit across the system, whether you're in Ocean Pines or you're in Salisbury or you're in Seaford, you have access to one record, and that follows you across that. So very important for patient safety and patient quality. Investments in ambulatory campuses, they really, as a system, we have the philosophy of having care close to home. I'll show you some pictures here in just a minute about campuses and what our plans are moving forward with that. And then there's a picture there, the wellness van. Some of you may have seen it because I think it was in here in the parking lot when we were doing some COVID testing. But, we do have access to really be able to get out to the community and into those areas that are underserved. And so we are putting plans around that now. Currently, we're working on how to get flu vaccinations because that's coming up quickly. How can we get that to underserved or, concerned areas, but also how about some of those other testing and wellness things? So that is in our plans moving forward. So here's just an example of the Ocean Pines campus, and it really is the philosophy is pretty much everything that a community might need except for hospital beds. And then there has been a huge push in Millsboro. This is the building currently that's in Millsboro, but it really is going to be something much bigger. There's been property built. It really will be that same type of campus feel. A lot of work we've been doing in the planning, some around wellness and what other services may we want on that campus. But what does that do for us here at Seaford? Nanticoke would be the hospital for those Delaware residents in Millsboro. So that brings that work to us. It makes sure that we're viable as an institution in Nanticoke, then also brings people into the town, when they're getting services. So certainly important for all of us. And this is just the picture of the pavilion here at Mears, but I'm not sure, but the new sign may be up there. I said I'm going to ride by there tonight and see if it's up there, but if it's not there, it will be soon. But, we've always had a great-looking campus there.
Thanks, Penny. And I couldn't stress that more. I always tell people in orientation, our number one goal as a healthcare system, obviously besides our mission to improve health, is to connect people with a primary care doctor. If you have a primary care physician, your chances are you're going to lead a healthier life. I mean, that's just the reality. If you don't, you come to the ER unplanned, all that kind of stuff. So that's why having more primary care doctors is a huge push for us. The second goal we have, though, is if you need something done like a procedure, we're going to compete for it. We're going to be the system of choice. We're going to have high quality. So as Penny mentioned, there's a lot of discussion about eastern Sussex County. It's growing. There's population is growing there. For Peninsula, it's important that the complicated stuff comes down to Salisbury, like open hearts, right? I mean, that's the complicated stuff. Some of the neuroendovascular surgery, brain surgery, but everything else that Nanticoke can do comes here. So that's the strategy with the eastern side of Sussex County. So transforming care, I often tell people we've been fixing people when they're broken or injured for 120 some odd years at this point in time. More and more of our folk, and we're pretty good at it. But we're actually trying to keep people healthy and well, and that's a lot harder. We often don't do what we're told to do by our doctors. I'm guilty. People in healthcare are sometimes guilty. So much of our focus, and what was great with Nanticoke is they were on this similar journey as well. How do we engage the community in health and wellness? How do we not just have a transactional relationship with somebody in the hospital, but we have case coordinators who can help them stay out of the hospital and be healthy and well, get them the social services that they need. So much of healthcare these days is not so much based upon your genetic code, but where you live, your access to food, the various types of disparities that are out there. So you'll see us as a system tackling that across 7 counties. And that's one of the reasons hospitals get together, because that's hard to do by yourself. You need a certain size really to do that with the whole continuum of services there. So there's a whole laundry list of things that we have for population health. Strategically, just 3 things we're working on the next couple of years. Honestly, we have to deal with COVID, and knock on wood, we're definitely in a good place on the hospital side of things. The system did really well taking care of COVID patients. You'll see us focusing on access, like I mentioned, more and more access, primary care doctors throughout the region. Effectiveness, high quality. We want to maintain the high quality that both institutions have had. And then finally, engagement. My goal is to have, if you're a community member, we want to see you partner with us for health and wellness. If you're a healthcare team member, we want to be the employer of choice, for people. And then finally, if you're another physician office or healthcare organization you want to be a part of. And so those are the things from an engagement perspective. In case you're curious how we got our brand name, we sometimes get that question out there. I will tell you, we did quite a bit of studies on this. The only rule was I could not participate. CEOs picked the worst names, so I stayed out of it. I released myself to the process. And we had a firm that kind of helps us do this. The big thing about this is you can come up with a lot of things, but the most important thing is you really have to have something that reflects who you are and who is the community that you serve, okay? We're not a Hopkins. We're not some fancy, ivory tower, right? We're kind of everyday people taking care of everyday people, family, friends, and neighbors. That's who we are. We spend a lot of time trying to understand that. We also realize that in order to do really well, you got to have quality, you got to treat people individually, and you got to focus on community. I mean, that's really what we're all about. And the fact that we live here and we take care of the people, that's how we're going to do the job that we need to do. So when they started kind of brainstorming names, they looked at us, and Tidal Health was available. They came up with a lot of names, but you put them through filters. There's it's hard naming something. I mean, all the good names are taken, let's face it. So, but they come up with these things, and they put them through filters, legal, does it take, all this kind of stuff. There's 8 or 9 filters. And, we've, lots of people, quite frankly, will always say Peninsula General Hospital. I can't shake that name with some people, but Nanacoke probably the same way. Nanacoke Memorial will be there, but don't get me wrong. You know, when you look at Tidal Health and you look at Delmarva, right? I mean, it's just it starts to feel right, you know. And at first you're like, you know, but then it starts to say, you know what? That's who we are, and that's who we take care of. So that's how we landed on Tidal Health. In case you're also curious, Nanacoke means tidewater people. Peninsulas are formed by the rising and lowering of tides. So we'll always be there. So with that, we took too long, I'm sorry. But be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from council? We really appreciate your presentation. No? Yes, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious how the merger affects insurance. I have a Maryland employer. I'm with Care First. I was a Delaware employer. I had Highmark.
Yep.
And they did not, the coverages were different. There are some things that some services that I could get at Nanacoke that were covered by Care First, and there were some that weren't. So I would have to go to Salisbury.
We're having conversations now with, for example, the CEOs of Care First and the CEOs of Highmark. We don't want this state line to get in the way of high quality. The reality is, most people don't know this, but prior to the merger, 24% of our revenue came from Delaware already at Peninsula. So we always supported the whole region anyway, but we're working through that. We're actually going payer by payer. And now that we're one system, you can have that conversation. Just treat us like a system. Because we have actually quite a few folks in Caroline County, over in Dorchester, where honestly, we're going to go after that too. Because we're going to provide good service and high quality products. So we want to be able to have Marylanders come right over to here. And obviously, you know, folks who may need to come to the Peninsula, go down the Peninsula. So, but it is, now that we're a system, you're able to have different conversations about it as opposed to when we were independent.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Well, I will say this to you, Steve, is that our focus has been growing our economy here in Seaford for some time. I'm sure Penny has shared the DuPont history here, but we've always viewed the hospital as a key part of our sales pitch to companies. It's key to our community. They are as ingrained in this community as this city is, and they're at every event pushing us sometimes, and maybe we push them, but they are just an incredible partner and an incredible asset to the city of Seaford. So we look forward to where this new path is going to go. I think it only gets better, and certainly your excitement is contagious. We appreciate you coming here tonight and sharing it with the community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe I did have one question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I just had a question about physicians. You said there were 250 primary care physicians?
We have about 250 providers. So those are physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants currently employed.
And why would they join you, or why would they stay primary care? Like, what are the benefits?
So the economics of healthcare these days, believe it or not, it's really hard to be a physician and make a living. They've kind of chopped physician reimbursement more than hospital reimbursement. So what happens is most hospitals subsidize physician practices. So being independent, the economics for a long time, unless you're in a certain specialties, plastic surgery, dermatology, orthopedic surgery are kind of three that can still hang out there on their own, but just about everyone else won't get reimbursed enough to make it. I often tell this story. My appendix ruptured on Father's Day, and my general surgeon got $300 to take it out at 2 in the morning. So if you do that enough, the math just, you know, it's hard to be independent. So more and more folks are part of systems.
All right.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you
you
again
very
for
much.
coming out
He did
tonight.
a
We
great
really
job
appreciate
by
it.
taking
Thank
it
you.
out.
That's good.
Okay, next we have Mr. Baird's going to come up from the Sussex County Conservation District to the Shoreline Project.
Okay, first thing I'd like to do is I would like to introduce Mr. David Baird, who's the district coordinator with the Sussex County Conservation District. And he and I are going to do this presentation together a little bit. So just to lead it in for the council, council's probably where we've been working on this project for several years. I was thinking about this earlier. We initially submitted the original project for engineering funding, I believe it was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So the Director of Public Works and myself have been working on this for quite some time. Riverview Park is actually located adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant. So it's a parcel of land, kind of small, about 3 acres, between the boat ramp there at the bottom of the picture and then the wastewater treatment plant kind of at the top of the picture there, outlined in red. And the existing conditions that we had, it's been there since the 70s. I believe we purchased that piece of land when we purchased some of the property for the wastewater treatment plant. You can see we had we were losing land. There was an old revetment there that you can kind of barely see. It's kind of washed into the river. This property, interestingly enough, is directly across from one of the stone depots on the other side of the Nanticoke River. So there was a lot of boat traffic, barge traffic in there, boats from the boat ramp itself, and then the barge traffic. And a lot of barge traffic turned around in that area, so on and so forth. So this is what we were getting, washout. We were losing the existing revetment, and we were losing the shoreline. There was an old stormwater facility there, but what would happen, the water would back up into it during tidal events. So you can kind of see the discoloration there. During high tide, river water would just come in there. A lot of plants weren't being maintained. They couldn't live like that. There's an old pavilion there that our departments, Parks and Recreation Department, had done a lot of work to over time, but had been there for a while. Existing paving and some fencing there. It is a public park. People go down there and fish, adjacent to our wastewater treatment plant. There's an old flagpole down there. What we did over the last 5 or 7 years is we did a concept plan, and Dr. Jules Brock with the University of Delaware came down with her team, and they developed this plan for what's termed Discovery Park. You see a lot of things in there, walking trails, the parking lot changes, and then there's what's called a living shoreline to reinforce the water's edge there, because we knew we were losing it, and we wanted to make sure we addressed sea level rise. We had addressed some other issues related to the environment and our discharge and doing our part to the Nanticoke River. It was about 170 lineal feet of shoreline, and on each side of it, the wastewater treatment plant, we had armored that shoreline with a revetment, I'm going to say 10 years ago. And then the state came in, redid the boat ramp, put in bulkheading. So it was like the last 170 feet in the area that did not have any shoreline armoring or was up to the task. So we had some goals and objectives when we started. We had to stabilize the shoreline, and we had to arrest the severe erosion that was going on, or we were going to lose the property and cause worse damage. So the living shoreline met the requirements of the new stormwater regulations, and we have to meet our new total maximum daily load requirements, which limits sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus, and it'll help us meet our goals in our watershed implementation plan, since we are part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave, where you can talk about where we went from here.
Okay. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Before I go into the story of how the Conservation District got involved in this project, I do just want to share a little bit of the background about the Conservation District. We were founded in 1944 to serve the folks here in Sussex County, and our mission is to provide technical and financial assistance to the community as a whole to protect land and water resources. Historically, that served with the agricultural community. That has since evolved over those last 70 years into stormwater work, also some equipment work, and the equipment work is what got us here in with the city of Seaford. We've provided services to the city for the last 20 or so years in various forms, and the city's been a great partner. So I was excited when Charles made the call and said, hey, we have this project down by the boat ramp. Is there something that the district could help us out with? So it just so happened at that time we were working on another project here at the Seaford Village Shopping Center that was going to be a water quality project with a lot of their stormwater when that facility was changing ownership. That project fell apart primarily due to timing of the new owners and the improvements that they were going to be making. And we were able to shift those dollars that the district had a grant award from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation over to the boat ramp project. The thing that made this project perfect was that the city had taken a lot of the initial undertaking, as Charles alluded to, the university folks that were in, did the design along with some engineering, private engineering firms. So we had a plan to work with, and then it was just figuring out a way to do it. So when you look at it, the total cost of the project was just a little bit over $400,000, with approximately half of that going to the pilings and the boardwalk. The funding, as I mentioned, a lot of it came from NIFWIF through their Chesapeake Bay program, and then the remaining funds were provided by the state through DENREC's non-point source program. So here's a picture, really post-completion of the construction. And as you can see, this is from the parking lot there. You can see the boardwalk in the background. One of the challenges that we had after the project was completed was we were still having a lot of runoff coming from the parking lot, just sheet flowing down and washing everything out. So that's when the rock and the filter socks were installed, just to hold some of that water back and reduce some of the erosion that we were having there. Another view of it, you can see the boardwalk that extends, from basically the existing parking lot and pavilion out to the river, and then extends over the river into the bulkheaded shoreline that was created, as well as over the living area. And think of a living shoreline as nothing more than a natural area with native plants that will take hold there, grasses, and the whole purpose of that is to mimic just a natural shoreline where the water laps in, it doesn't have those hard waves coming in from a lot of the boat traffic or the winds that are blowing or the tides moving in and out. As well, it's a way to act as a buffer from anything draining into the river from the surrounding areas. Here's a picture of the boardwalk, and we did rely on some local subcontractors to assist in the construction of that. The original proposal called for that boardwalk to extend further down, closer to the wastewater treatment plant, but due to some budget constraints, we did pull back on that. But the nice part about it is that the design is there. It could easily be extended, and I know you have another project along the river you're going to be talking about later on this evening. So, there's always the possibility of extending this further into the downtown area as well. Once again, another view from the river, so folks can come out, get out over the river, look back over the shoreline, see some of the benefits of it, and really get a different perspective on what the city's goals are and what they were trying to accomplish, and it so far successfully accomplished by the completion of this project. This is looking back from the boardwalk to the shoreline. The riprap bulkhead that you see there is designed to allow the tidal influence to ebb and flow in and out depending on whether the tide's coming in or going out. That allows it to fill up in a more, tame and not so turbulent activity. It really breaks that wave action along with the pilings that were installed on the boardwalk itself. What that will allow is erosion to not take place in that area, as well as a lot of the native plants that have been planted and now, quite frankly, even just 2 to 3 weeks later, are really starting to take hold, and we expect that to continue over the fall and into next spring. So I'll be honest with you, if you go down there now, it doesn't look like much. However, give it a year or two, and it's going to be quite the spot for visual. Another view of the riprap. Obviously, this is at high tide, but you can see a lot of the plantings on the shoreline. So it really begins at the pavilion and works its way down. There's also a lot of grasses that are taking hold underneath that water. And all of those plants working together really also address a lot of the water quality issues, and will also serve as some habitat for a lot of the wildlife in the area. And one of the things that we've all had challenges with, and if you go down there now, you'll see a lot of string put out there just to keep the ducks and the geese away, just simply because they were eating a lot of what had been planted initially, to really no surprise of any of us. And then another view at high tide. This is, to the left of this photo is the boat ramp. This was really more of a beach area, and you can see some of the plantings are taking hold there, especially right along the pier coming out, and then more of the native grasses over on the left. We also instilled some filter socks in there, which once again just hold back some of that sediment when that heavy rains are coming from the parking lot and wanting to wash some of those nutrients down to the water. And that concludes our project for this evening, and I really just want to thank the city for its cooperation throughout. It's really been a great partnership. We're talking about a couple of other things right now that I think we're all hopeful that could come to fruition, and I just appreciate the city's support of the district, and we're glad to be a partner.
Does anybody, thank you, David. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Baird while he's here? Yes, sir, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you so much for helping improve the river shore there. I've been checking on it since the wintertime, you know. It's been a long process, and it's great to see it done. Is there a second phase to this, or does this complete the intended project?
Do you want to take it, or do you
Yeah,
want me to?
well, currently what we have with the district and Dave Baird is, this is what we needed to do to arrest the shoreline. If we remember the overall park design, there are many phases of that.
Right.
So, yeah. And certainly, as David alluded to, you know, the boardwalk could be extended under the original design. So there are certainly phases that can follow depending upon funding, you know, desire. One of the things the mayor and I talked about, you know, and David alluded to it, you will see the Oyster House project come forward as your next item of new business. At some point, you know, could we interconnect all of these pieces through the downtown? Could we interconnect the old train station as a part of a walking or maybe even hiking, biking trail? Those are some things that could be done and utilize. This is a unique piece of land in a strategic location, and it is uniquely beautiful. One of the things, too, David talked about all these benefits that occur through the plantings, maintaining your shoreline. You know, it'd be a great project for like 4-H or some other school kids to create displays where it emphasizes the benefits of these native plants, how you plant them, so on and so forth. So I think the possibilities are not limitless, but there are a bunch of possibilities. And we would be remiss if we did not thank Burley Mears, our Director of Public Works, for his efforts. He was project manager on this project, and it was not without headaches. We do, you know, you're hearing the best of it, but Burley had some mountains to climb with making this happen and working with the Conservation District and their people, getting the final approvals from the authorities having jurisdiction. So, Burley, thank you very much for your efforts to make this project a reality.
Isn't that the case with all the projects that come to us? We get to see the pretty pictures and we assume it just happened. And there's a lot of work and a lot of times, and I'm sure there's frustrations we don't hear about it, but we appreciate you helping us see it through, and it's going to be great. Families
Absolutely.
are going to enjoy that area. So thank you so
think
much
so.
for sharing
You're very
that.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda are bids for the Oyster House Phase 1 improvements, and Mrs. Tricia Newcomer is going to lead us through.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As Mr. Baird just alluded to, and the city manager, it's a perfect segue to go into discussion on Oyster House Park. As council was aware, we did put out to bid the first phase of the master plan, which encompasses the bulkhead, the construction of a pier, the floating docks. And we talked about that for quite some time. We actually were finally able to get that out to bid. We had bids received on September 2nd. We received 4 bids. The estimated probable cost, I'll put that up front, from LAS Landscape Architecture, who is our consultant on this, was $1.3 million, just over 1.3. So we did receive 4 bids, and the successful low bidder on the project is Disson and June out of Stevensville, Maryland, with a bid of $998,498. Adding to that, the construction contingency and the construction administration an additional $100,000, making the total budget for the first phase, the project total of $1,098,498. As you may or may not remember, we did bring forward in June the funding plan that the Conservancy has been working on with private investors, grant funding, funding from the state, funding from the city. So we do have available in FY21 funding $1,211,500. So we do have the funds to cover this full phase. I know we had a concern early on when we did bring our funding plan forward before council. We weren't sure, particularly based on that cost estimate, the initial cost estimate. We obviously didn't have enough in our funding available, and we weren't sure what that shortfall would do. But fortunately for us, bids did come under, and we actually we'll have a little bit, about $113,000 left over to go into the next phase, which is exciting for us.
Okay, are there any questions in reference to the bids that came in on the first phase of the Oyster House project? No. Okay, with that, I'll accept the motion.
Councilman Holland, Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to accept the bid from Destin and June Company for the Oyster House Park Phase 1 improvements in the amount of $998,498 with funding as outlined in the June 19th, 2020 funding plan shared to City Council on June 23rd, 2020 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
Okay, thank you very much. Ashley, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. I think it's important to go over, or just point out that although the funding was tight on this, the importance of getting this first phase done is so that the Chesapeake Conservancy can now really go out and celebrate and push this out to other supporters to raise more money to get onto the even more expensive projects that are ahead of this. I know citizens sometimes get concerned that things move slow, but as you see these dollars up here, these are big, big money projects. They take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of money. And so it takes time to bring that money together and get through that. So,
And I will say on their behalf, Charles and I both spoke with one of their board members with regard to the numbers, and they were very excited to actually see this first phase come to fruition. So they're all in. They're still our partner in this project, and we're looking forward to working with them.
well, if you see what's going on down at the boat ramp in that park, and you see what's happening here, this is truly going to be a draw to our riverfront, which is what we've been trying and striving for some time in our plan for downtown. So it's starting to come together. So thank you for your leadership and support pushing this. Thank you guys for all your work on that. So thank you. Okay, next under old business is the voter registration. Is Ms. Tracy Torbert going to lead us through this?
She is.
All right.
Good evening.
Good evening, Tracy.
So the previous 2 council meetings, I provided some information to you regarding how we currently do voter registration process and if we were to change over to the state's voter registration. I did mention at the last meeting about an online fillable form, kind of similar to what the state uses, and I actually had a demo with that vendor. So he actually took our voter application form that's currently on our website and converted it to a fillable form for us. And he gave us some pricings on that. Staff hasn't gone too much in depth with it other than to see how it would work, just because we wanted a direction from you before we did any, as far as spending any money. So what happens is we would replace the link that currently is on our website with this URL, and they would see this, and they would just fill it out, just checking things. And then once they completed this, they would submit it, and then you would assign an email address to a staff member would get an email that, we received a new voter application. So you would go in there and review it. And you guys are aware with it, down here, we require staff to sign on it as well. So it would show up in basically this format that they have. It's just different columns, like an Excel spreadsheet, but it's more different than that. But basically, it would show pending until staff member went into that document and signed off on it that it was completed, because we would sign off that it was at the bottom, that we put them in the book. So you could use that to show how many you did. It would show, you know, how many new voters we got, and it would also show the status of the application, whether it was completed or in process or that type of nature. They do also offer other forms. I specifically asked about request for absentee ballots was another one that I asked for. So basically, they can take any form that we desire, and this is some examples he gave me from some other municipalities that he worked with. They basically do work specific for governments, is what this, it's called Seamless Stocks, does. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's another way that we could utilize to allow people that they wouldn't be inconvenienced to come into the office. They can use that resource to go directly to our website, and we could get away from doing the whole faxing and scanning that document back to us. We would get it directly, so it would be, they wouldn't have to print it out and scan it in or do any of that. They would just do it all online.
Do we have any idea what something like that would cost, Tracy?
So they have, the option that would probably be best for us would be, it was unlimited storage, and it's up to 10 forms. And for the first year, it's $6,095. Of that cost, $1,595 is basically a setup fee, and it also provides you a resource as far as if you need some support, any tech support or anything like that. If you go to the second year, if you renew with them, it drops down to $4,500. And that's up to 10 forms, so, you know, you could utilize them for other things such as service agreements for utilities or anything like that. But our main purpose right now for reaching out to them was in reference to the election, as far as the two for registering to vote and absentee ballot requests.
Okay, all right. That's per year, correct?
Correct.
Okay, okay. Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Torbert? So what's before you tonight is whether the council has a desire to stay with our current plan of how we register voters, which at our last meeting was kind of a mixed bag of, I heard that we do a great job at it, to maybe possibly switching to the state plan. But that's what's in front of us, is there's been a couple of options presented to either stay on our current path, potentially adding some additional online tools to make it simpler for people to register, or moving to the state plan, which then would take the city of Seaford kind of out of registering voters, but then would create on the backside of that some labor costs to sort through all the voters in the 19973 zip code to find out who are actually city residents and pull them out that way. So that is the decision is before council tonight.
Question for Tracy. Tracy, would you be able to pull up how a person would register if they were going through the state website? Is that something that can be done? So I can compare theirs to ours?
So they would go to the state's website, Department of Elections, and then right here where it says register, this is how theirs would. So they actually have a process where you can look up to see if you're registered already, which would, you know, where it says look up. But they can also, you can also register on here. They just ask for your name, date of birth, and driver's license number. And then here, if you go to not registered yet, you would have to agree to all those terms, which when we did our online fillable form, we could also, if we were to go that route, include these. Because when you sign the book, we have a piece of paper now that's translated in Spanish, and it's in English that states this. So if you hit agree, then it asks you all of these over here. You can see on the left-hand side of your screen all these questions. So you would need to, you see all of the personal information, your address. They ask your political party, and then you would have to do the electronic signature and then confirm.
Okay.
So theirs is actually, you go through multiple screens.
And the cost associated is, how much would the cost be for this versus keeping our own and just paying the $6,000, give or take?
Okay, if we switch to the state system, this is already up and running, there'd be no cost to us for that, for registration purposes. The additional or the change in cost would come up when we actually do the election. Tracy, would you just talk about how that would look?
Yeah, so when we actually, if we were to change to the state system, we would get an Excel database from them containing every person that has 19973 zip code. So that would include people in Blades, people in Middle Ford, Concord, anyone in our zip code. And what we have to do as far as staff-wise in the MOU, the agreement that we enter into with the state, it's our responsibility as the municipality to go through that listing and code those that are in our voting district and those that are not in our corporate limits that are not eligible to vote. So we would have to take those, everyone out and code them. So I think a key thing to point out here is, you know, whether we do the state system or whether we do maintain what we have, and the conversations that I've had with everyone, there's no system that's going to be 100% error-free. Human error is going to always occur. And it's always going to be something that comes up, whether, you know, someone thought they registered and didn't, or someone didn't change their license, their address on their license. That could happen. But as far as staff time, it would be more as far as going to the state system. The first time would be probably the most time because it's something new to us to learn as far as coding. But there's always costs with elections as far as the cost for the voting machines. We pay the poll workers a small amount of money. We feed them meals, the advertisements, and all of that type of nature. So that cost would be the same regardless of which way you go.
And additionally, when you make the switch, you will lose the
Non-resident property owners.
Thank you, non-resident property owner, because the state doesn't maintain that. They're not going to do that list for you. So
But that is something we could maintain a separate list here still.
well, I don't know that you could, because we talked through that. When it comes time to do a poll, then we're maintaining still a book, if that's the case.
We're really not getting away from what we're currently doing. And we would still, you know, you have all those questions. Do you still allow them hours to, you know, after hours to register? You know, there's still things that you would have to look at. And it would be kind of confusing to our poll workers because they would have two different databases that they would be signing people in.
And Tracy, based on your research, none of the municipalities that went to the state voter registration system, they don't do non-resident property owner, is that correct?
Yeah, they either do one or the other, not a mixture of both.
It's just different.
It's just different.
It's just different.
Right.
So is Jose, to clarify a little bit too, for the candidate, it would change them as well, as I think a lot of candidates now running for office spend a tremendous amount of time trying to register voters. This would take that away. They would register, if they register to vote in a state election, then they would be registered.
And there would be that time lapse when you ask for that data, when you're campaigning, when you're going out knocking door to door. Typically you ask, you know, myself for can I have the spreadsheet, and we can sort it by address or alphabetical order. In this instance, we would ask it from the state. So, you know, we would have to code all of that before we could even give that to you. So there is, you know, may call a little more timing as far as when it would be available to you.
Councilman Henderson, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to understand this option. that if we accept the state voter registration database, that non-resident property owners would no longer have a vote?
Well, that would have, the way that it's written in the charter, they do. I mean, you could, but we just haven't found any in the state of Delaware that have done both systems, maintained their non-resident property owners and done the state system. I mean, it's kind of your decision, I guess it would just be more.
It gets into a legal question, I think. We'd have to verify with our city solicitors that there's no prohibition to do that. We don't know of one. We just don't have a sister municipality we can point to that says they do both.
And to get any, information from it, to ask any questions with.
I mean, if you want to go that direction, a charter change would be necessary. That's when it'd go through the legal test. We could certainly ask our solicitor if that could be done, but then it's the logistics of actually how we do it. So the poll workers would still have a book, I'm assuming, that we would maintain locally, because it's not going to be provided by the state of Delaware. Right. So it'd be a much smaller book, but it would be out of the ordinary for that class of people. And then there'd be two lists that each poll worker would have. You could be on either one. How we would work that out, if that's the way it worked.
Well, that makes the water no more clear.
Would it be helpful to understand from a legal perspective if we could would it help you make a decision if you understood from a legal perspective if we could even maintain two separate lists? Is it something that we should ask prior to moving forward?
I can say unequivocally that I would not support a measure where a tenant could vote, but the owner of the property could not.
Amen.
So that needs to be hammered out before I'll vote for option A.
And just to clarify, Tracy, in your research, that exactly what Councilman Henderson said is factually the case in the other communities that have gone with the state database, correct?
They base it on who resides in their town or city is who's eligible to vote. Those that use the state.
And none of them have non-resident property owner voting rights.
And that's smart.
Because I think at the current time, almost 1/10 of our registered voters are non-resident property owners. That's like in the hundreds.
Yeah.
Somewhere, I
And
recall
typically, those
maybe-
are mainly the ones that come out to vote each year or vote by absentee.
Yeah.
And I will say this election cycle, we spoke specifically to two of those individuals. And because it's prevalent now legally to go to, instead of a sole proprietorship ownership, a LLC ownership, two of them specifically lost that ability, and they wanted us to look at somehow incorporating LLCs. Again, that's a whole legal question that would have to be answered.
Councilman Holland, Councilman McCoy, do you have any input on this?
Yes, I'll say talk to the city solicitor and find out what we can do rather than not wasting the time. To not be able to do anything.
Yeah, echoing what Councilman Henderson says, is there's not any clear, I think you need to more refinement.
Then I'll accept the motion if we choose to table.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we table this once more until more facts are presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Henderson. Do we have a second?
Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
We have a second. Ashley, can we have a roll call vote on this, please?
Councilman Santos,
Aye.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy,
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. We'll ask city manager to follow up with our city solicitor to see if it is something legally possible to continue to honor non-resident property owners in an election if we switch to the state registration. Yes, sir, Councilman Henderson.
Just I did look up the latest list in the previous election that there were 86 non-registered or non-resident property owners who were registered to vote, or 85, I'm sorry.
And that number has grown some because, as you all are aware, if you do not reside in that property, you have to own that property 6 months prior to the election. So there was some that were registered that were not eligible in this last election due to not owning it enough time prior to that election.
And there were some that weren't registered, that came up and registered the day
Correct.
of the election. So I mean, it's an
It's
important
probably,
piece.
I agree, it's probably closer to 100.
Right. All right, so city manager will look into this and
Yes,
follow
sir.
back with us, and we'll bring this back again. All right, next we have the second reading of the amended Chapter 8, the special events.
Okay, so we did table this at the last council meeting, and this would replace the existing language in the municipal code that requires special event permits for gatherings in public places, along city streets, in city parks, so on and so forth. I know there were a few questions at the last meeting. If there are any other questions today, we can certainly, staff is here to try to answer them if council has any.
Okay, are there any questions on the amended Chapter 8?
Not a question, it was more like, yeah. Last meeting, we're talking about the fee.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and if I wanted to change that part with the fee and also remove the word servant describing a person, those two things.
Okay, so a couple questions. Removing the word servant from the definition of person, we can certainly strike that, all right? As far as the fee, can you expound upon what
Yes.
what actually you'd like done?
Yes, it was to make the application fee in section mark 8.3.5 refundable if the event would be 14 days or more from the date that the application was submitted, and if the event was scheduled for less than 14 days due to it being a March or whatever the reason may be, that the application fee be non-refundable.
All right, let me say a couple things about that. In the application fee, it does state that the application must be submitted to the Department of Parks and Recreation at City Hall no fewer than 45 days nor greater than 12 months prior to the proposed event. We require at least 45 days for some of these large events so that we can have, as an example, sister police agencies render assistance for us, schedule the the Public Works Department to close roads, if there are other equipment we need to otherwise get. So 15 days, if you submitted 15 days in advance of your event, we have the right to deny it because you did not meet the requirements anyway. So let me maybe restate it this way. Are you suggesting that, as an example, if you submit it 60 days in advance, then you get your $100 back, it's refunded. Mm-hmm. If it's less than that, like let's say at the 45 days where the code says, then you don't?
Yes, the 14 days, I read something in here towards the end where it mentioned the 14 days, and that's why I was
yeah, I
going
think
off of
that's
that.
an issue. I think that's, and I'd have to read it again, but it has to do with the penalties, and if you go ahead and have it unlawfully, you gather, there's some legal remedy in there. I mean, one of the things in thinking about it, we'd have to talk with staff, with that type of situation, somebody's going to have to keep a list of when you submitted, which, okay, we have that, it should be a completed form, so on and so forth, but so many of these events we have and how they evolve by nature, someone will call and say, hey, can I reserve, Nutter Park for this day? I'm thinking about doing an event, a birthday party, whatever. They will call back closer and say, yeah, I called you 3 months ago, and I'm going to move forward with that. Staff could get into some issues where they would say, no, I called you. Yes, but you did not fill out our paperwork until 3 months later. I guess I would just suggest a couple, go ahead.
Yeah, I did mention that from the date that there was the completed application. So yeah, if someone just calls and says, I'm going to have an event in a month or so, or 2 months, then that's not a completed application.
So if they give us 60 days instead of just the 45, you'll give them, or more, you would like the language to state that they will get their $100 refunded.
Yes.
If it's less than between 59 and 45, they don't get it refunded. Because anything less than 45, they don't get the permit.
Okay.
Is
Then-
that,
Then that would be, yeah, I want there to be an avenue where if someone wants to have an event and if they do everything the right way, they do it responsibly, then they have $100, the $100 application is refunded.
I'd just like to make a suggestion that,
Well, but before we get too much into crafted motions, let's see if anybody else has any other questions or
Sorry, yes,
comments
sir.
here. In reference to the special event permit. Anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, we'll put it out for motion.
I still don't understand. I don't understand why you're asking it to be refunded.
Because right now, I think it's refunded, right? I think
under the current code, yes, there's a deposit basically you put down.
Yeah.
But right now, there's really no charge, as I understand it from Katie and Trish, there's really kind of no charge. It's a deposit that you make on the park. If you leave it in a good condition, not trash, you don't break anything, you get your $100 back. So it's not an application fee. Right now, there is not one.
Well, if we, yeah, so that's the reason behind it. I kind of like it that way. I know that we had to get a little bit more technical and add a lot of definitions and stuff but
Mr. Mayor, I think last time, I think you were leaning towards to get the $100 back, and we get them incentive to keep the park clean, or clean it up afterwards.
so I still think it's an incentive, yes, to keep it.
I think part of this, where we get confused, is this deposit in case something's damaged to now the
Right.
cost it takes for the city to gather all these employees together to plan it, right? There's a lot of cost involved in that. I think that was some of the intention of the fee, that it would not be refundable because that money doesn't come back. The taxpayers are paying for that.
Right.
And the $100 doesn't come close to the cost of what the city's invested
Right.
in for someone to have an event who may or may not even be from the
here.
city. So it
What-
then,
what-
it
what
then
if-
becomes an issue of who
What if
should
they
pay
are
for
from
it.
the city? You know, I don't want to.
It's the same thing. It's costing the city money, right? Is it?
But we're
it's-
using their taxpayer money to, you know,
Right.
So, I mean, those are the two things that I saw, I mean, that were, I kind of liked the old way a little bit, but I realized we had to make some changes in case.
If I may.
Sure.
The only scenario I see where a fee would be refundable in this case would be if someone made the application prior to 45 days, and within 14 days of that 45-day notice, they cancel the event. I would think that they would be able to get a refund for that because the city has not gone through all of the exercises at that point and expended time and energy on the planning of the event, where you would have a 14-day grace where you could get a refund. But if you go through the entire process of your proper notice and the proper planning with all the departments and go through with this event, $100 does not touch the cost involved in putting on a special event like a softball tournament or a big car show at Ross Mansion or some other special event that takes huge amounts of planning and does tax
the resources of a very small Parks and Recreation Department. So, not to mention the other departments that are directly or indirectly involved. I think the $100 fee for an event, which is a special event, in accordance with the definitions of activity, is of a large enough scope so that $100 is not that much. So I'm inclined to agree with you that a refund would be due if they passed the 14-day or maybe the 15-day. If it got down to 30 days and they said, well, we can't do it, COVID, or some other the passing of a key participant or the illness or something like that, that would say, okay, after 2 weeks, okay, you can get your money back because we're not planning. But to go all the way through the event and then just give the $100 back at the end of the event, I don't think is equitable to the taxpayers of the city, because we're putting an extra load on the city personnel, let alone expense. There is a cost recovery, but there's all this planning that goes up to that.
Okay, any other questions or comments from council? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Yes, sir.
Now, before we make this motion, he wants to change that word, so are you still allowed to make that motion?
Well,
As
it's
servant?
whoever makes the motion makes what they would like to see passed. So
Jose, you want to make that motion? And
if
Yes,
that
sir.
motion doesn't pass, then we come back.
Okay, should I start off with the servant and word vocabulary then?
Yep.
I make a motion to remove the word servant from the list of definitions describing quotation person in section mark 8.3.2. Do I have to make?
Do you want to do it as a lump sum motion or break it apart?
If we could, if council would like that, I'd like to approve it all in one motion if the changes aren't voluminous.
Keith, if you don't mind continuing.
And the second part was, second motion is to make the application fee in section mark 8.3.5 refundable if the event will be 45 days. Charles, can you remind me?
Okay, so
How you
what I
describe
heard
that
you
one?
say was, if the event is 60 days, let me look at it. That's what, again, they don't, is it simpler just to change, let me go back to that section real quick, 8.3.5. Sorry. Is it simpler to just say, instead of non-refundable, just refundable in that section? Because again, we don't have, if this is adopted, we don't have to give them a permit if they come in less than 45 days from the event. We're likely to deny the permit. So they have to comply. The only thing you could parse it out, I guess, to say is, if you come in 60 days or more before your event, the application fee is refundable. Maybe that's what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, that would work.
Was everyone able to hear the motion?
so is that along the line with Councilman Henderson said?
No.
I'm trying to see if I can word it so that it includes Ben Henderson's. It's,
I mean, if I might if you go on to read the rest of that, it says the applicant may request a waiver of the application fee. Such request shall contain an explanation of how such a waiver fee would be in the best interest of public health, safety, and welfare. A request for waiver will be reviewed by the city manager. In the event of an act of God, a pandemic, a tragedy that occurs with the planning committee, they always have that safety valve of saying to the city manager, here's what happened, we'd like to refund this.
Within 15 days of the event.
And that's a parameter, certainly your point is very good. We would use that because, if we're still 30 days out, we likely have not spent any more money than we otherwise would administratively, unless it was extraordinary. I'm trying to think, maybe an insurance certificate that had to be in place or something of that nature. But they kind of have that safety valve to request it right in the ordinance, but they would have to request it. And
In that case, I would just leave the 60-day if that other part covers.
that it is refundable if the event is
60 days or more from the date
if
of
the
the-
application is completed 60 days or greater.
I don't understand what that accomplishes.
Yeah, I don't need it.
I don't understand what,
Yeah, for $100 is $100. Yeah.
Well, I think we should do it appropriately. We should do it this way. We have a motion on the table. And that motion, if I understand it correctly, is to accept the amended Chapter 8, less the word servant listed, and to make the deposit refundable if they file within 60 days of the event. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I just wanted to repeat it so I understood it. So that's the motion on the table. Is there a second? Okay, so there is no second, so the motion fails. So I will ask, is there another motion? Or,
That was to fill both parts.
well, we did them as a group, yep. Would someone else like to make a motion?
I have if I might, I still have a question. I want to try to understand the reason why you would strike the word servant.
Because the other day you mentioned that we were public servants, and I tried to find other ways but that we would also fall under any of the other definitions or some other definitions. Let me go back to that part.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you deem the word servant to be a pejorative?
I mean, I see words being stricken out right now in real estate where instead of calling it a master bedroom, we call it the primary bedroom, and it's going across all over. It's something we do in Delaware now. And as far as servant goes, I mean, I feel like I would fall under natural person. If I'm working for a company, that I'm already an agent or an employee, I really don't see servant as being a word that really needs to be there in today's age. And
I appreciate your answer. Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve the ordinance to amend Chapter 8 of the Municipal Code of Seaford regarding special events in the city as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman McCoy, I'll second.
Okay, thank you. We have a second. Ashley, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Santos,
no.
Councilman Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Okay, it passes 3-1. Thank you. Okay. All right, reminders and meetings?
We have none, sir.
How about that? Okay, we'll go on to committee reports. We'll start with Administration IT with Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, as far as meetings goes, there was the Route 13 water main installation project final inspection. This was fully funded by $500,000 bond bill. Thanks to Danny Short for helping us with funding. It provides water service and it enhanced fire protection to annexed areas that previously did not have service. There was another meetings that were attended was the Sussex County Association of Towns. Dan Henderson is the president. And as far as the IT report, they completed the network relocation project, and this work fully migrates the network infrastructure at the police into a secure environment. Everything else was maintenance. For the Teamsters, proposed changes were, the costs were analyzed. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Police and Fire with Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report has been submitted in its entirety. I'll hit some of the highlights. Have some notes from Chief Wilson's report. Alarms to date as of 0900 hours this morning. Fire and rescue were 535 calls, averaging 2.1 calls per day to date. The total for August was 92 calls. For EMS calls, there are 2,238 calls to date, averaging 9.3 calls per day to date, and the total for August was 297 calls. All apparatus are in service. Under EMS, ambulance B87 specification bid, they've been open, and for transparency, they were all opened at the last department meeting. The committee has reviewed the specification and are prepared to discuss the award process with the executive board tonight at tonight's meeting, which may be going on or may have concluded already. And in order to move forward with the capital expenditure motion at the upcoming department meeting. You'll see that there has been some training and some events going on. The aerial testing is scheduled for September 25th. And it may have been today, or must have been today, that they presented a video to the Seaford School District students showing as a welcome back to school video. So try to catch that on their Facebook page. Second,
Excuse me, was the video as well done as the one by the city, or was it in comparison?
They're all together.
Okay.
Yes,
It's all together?
it's all together, yeah.
No competition, sir.
I'm sorry.
So you'll have to log on.
Do your own.
Yeah. So, Second Assistant Chief Tom McCates has submitted his monthly fire summary, which you can see the distribution, days and times. Interesting to note that the Thursdays are the slowest days. If you look across the distribution of the calls, you know, they're Thursday's not a very busy day. So for whatever reason that is, I don't know. I'll have to ask maybe. You can go further down with the numbers and types of alarms. There's a further breakdown of how we assisted other fire departments and duty calls. And you'll see some notable alarms for the last month, for August. And I'll move on to police. You'll see a chart of year-to-date crimes, 2019 crimes, and 2018 crimes. And there were, as far as drug complaints, there were no overdoses during this period, which is good news. There had been a spike in overdoses, but it seems to have slowed. And you'll see some other significant events that are ongoing, or not ongoing, that did happen. Some investigations are ongoing. In training, some key training over the last period, there's been some training on child exploitation investigations by the Criminal Investigations Unit. 2 detectives attended that training. And our Deputy Chief just completed internal affairs certification through the Diego Law Group. And there's an upcoming in-service training scheduled for the week of September 7th, which is this week, which covers the use of force policy, an active shooter policy, and a non-lethal training for Seaford Police Department members. And they continue the volunteerism by helping out with the Nanticoke Senior Center with meal deliveries, and they also assisted with traffic control at the Trinity 5K run. So they're busy helping out, and they're busy protecting the community. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Code, Parks and Rec, Councilman Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Touch on some highlights, and I will start off with Parks and Recs. You are prepping softball fields for upcoming leagues, and they held a meeting with Mark Quillen and Clint Dunn about football field rentals in the fall possibly, and approximately 40 kids registered for both youth soccer and youth flag football, and several special events permit applications had been received and sent out. And they met with Lisa Wool and Nanticoke River Watershed Alliance about beautification projects throughout the city. And I will touch on code. Allen House on High Street would like to receive a certificate of occupancy in the next few days. Project is finally coming to completion, and all the work is routine. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. And then we have Electric, Councilman McCoy.
Mr. Mayor, I have a few highlights. It's been provided in its entirety. Over the last report, I pulled in the primary wire and made up the ends between the switch and auto zone, trimmed vines and trees on Magnolia Drive, and worked in Muirfield 2, dug in a secondary conduit, set a transformer, pulled in a primary wire, and set a street light. As far as the director is concerned, he had his director's meeting, a staff meeting, and met with Charles about the building expansion. Over the next few weeks, they want to terminate some secondary wires at Montessori School, do monthly substation checks, and continue changing the lights on Sussex Highway to LED. And I believe you have a few pictures from Tricia Newcomer showing some of our finest. Greg Brook up on the lines there. Doing some lineman training down there in VA. And that has been my report.
That is great. Thank you so much. I do want to make council aware that on the economic development side that Seaford was asked to participate in a site selector cook-off with Dogfish and the Frozen Farmer out of Kenton, Sussex County. No elected people got to be selected to be a part of this group, so I feel honored that Seaford was. It's a great opportunity to put Seaford out there in front of everybody else as a place to choose. And the week following, we're putting together a video on the Downtown Development District. We were asked to represent the state on how well Seaford has done, drawing dollars in from that into our downtown development area. So I'll be on camera to produce some good results on what was before and what is after the DDD. So just want you to know that you're being represented out there on the good work you're doing on the economic development side, and I'll do my best to represent you well. So with that, I'll accept a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Councilman Henderson, I second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, case unanimous. Thank you.